Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Northwest Chamber of Commerce member interview studio sessions. My name is Emily Winters. I'm the Executive Director for the Chamber, and joining me today is Gary McCammon of Spike College Planning. Gary, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Emily. Glad to be here.
We are so excited. Gary joined the Chamber last year, and we have gotten to know each other over the last few months. And I know for one thing that he's very passionate about his line of work, so we will jump right on in. Starting with our first question, and what is it, Gary, that first got you into the world of college planning?
Well, for me, I took a sales job in 2004 for the University of Phoenix in Timonium, and I was in charge of enrolling new students. So that was my first endeavor into the education field as an employee. I worked there for about a year and a half. I then transitioned to Walden University downtown, not only as an employee, but also as a student. Because if Emily put her information into phoenix.edu and you were considering going to college while working full-time, I needed to be in college while I was working full-time. So the first thing I did was join the MBA program at University of Phoenix. All the classes, thankfully, were in the classroom at the Timonium campus. By the time I transitioned to Walden University downtown, they're an online-only school. So in the 2.5 years I was there, I never once met a student I enrolled in person. So thankfully, I got the finance and accounting and that kind of stuff out of the way with a professor that could come over to my desk and help me. I finished up the degree, the MBA, with a concentration in marketing at Walden. I didn't really like it as much because I was in a call center. I was told to make 80 calls a day. I was pretty much handcuffed to my desk. So I went back to Strayer University, their White Marsh campus, because I could break up my day by scheduling appointments for students to come into campus. And we would walk them through the whole process. If they had been to college before, we would get their transfer credit. We would help them with financial aid. We would help them with their resume. They'd meet their professors. And in best case scenario, they'd wind up at the Baltimore Arena in a year or two, walking across the stage and getting their diploma. So for me, that's how I got involved in it. After my time at Strayer was over at the end of 2011, essentially what I do as a college planner is everything that a school counselor in a school really should do. The problem is, and here's my story, I went to Perry Hall High School. My school counselor had 600 of us that he worked with. There were three school counselors, 1,800 kids. So I was one of the 300. He knew my name, so that was good. I got 3 sentences of college planning. You did good on the SATs and math. Engineers make a lot of money. Let's apply to these 5 schools. So I chose University of Delaware because it was 60% women. And 1 semester later, my blood alcohol level was higher than my GPA and I wasn't an engineer anymore. Mm-hmm. So I switched to journalism, really related, right? And then the senior editor of the Philadelphia Daily News was my professor for 1 class each semester for the last 5 semesters I was there. And I was volunteering, writing articles for the school newspaper. Everything was great, but did I ever travel from Newark, Delaware to Philadelphia and visit him at work? Nope. And until about 10 years ago, I had no idea that there was a paid internship at the Philadelphia Daily News. So I took a job at a weekly newspaper in Perry Hall. 2 years later, the paper went out of business, and it was exactly the same time that the Baltimore Sun was getting rid of the Evening Sun. So that was the end of my journalism career. Mm-hmm. So I believe that school counselors today are probably the most underpaid and overworked people in the school system because they're psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, parents to a lot of these kids. And oh, by the way, they have to help a student with college as well. So for the college part of it, that's what I do. And it's neat because every student is different. Even if it's brother and sister in the same family, they're totally different. So it's exciting for me because I never go through the same day twice.
Yeah, that is exciting. And about the school counselors, I mean, just to have that many students to, want to care for and help find their path. I mean, it's a full-time job, 40 hours a week, and having to do all that. That's a lot of hats to wear in one position. So I understand that.
And honestly, with my school counselor, and I saw him at church a few months ago. I still
Oh,
talk to him. I love him. But
yeah,
if someone walked in his office one morning and they wanted to kill themselves, that's a little more important than where Gary's going to college.
right.
And all of that stuff is on their plate.
Yeah,
So it's I don't have any ill will towards school counselors. I just know that what I do can really help them out and take something off their plate.
of course. And it's definitely focused, which is great. And what is it that you love most about being in your field of work?
Well, for me, it's just to educate not only the students but also their parents. So
Mhm.
my first college planning client in 2011 was my best friend from University of Delaware. It was his daughter. Him and I failed out of engineering together. He wound up getting a music degree. I'm real related to engineering too, right? Um, his daughter she really wanted to go to University of Delaware to follow in mom and dad's footsteps.
Mhm.
So when him and I graduated in the class of 1990, cost of attendance, meaning tuition, room, board, books, and fees, everything included, was $12,000. When Leah was a freshman, it was $48,000.
Yeah.
So it had gone up 400% in 25 years. This year, by the way, it's 58. If you're an engineer, they add an additional $4,000 on. It's $62,000 to go to University of Delaware.
It's
And
crazy.
cost of college has gone up 6% a year. I'm hoping with COVID that'll kind of level things out or bring things back down to earth.
Right.
But it was so cool to work with him. But he's thinking, oh, it was $12,000 for me. Oh, it's probably double.
Yeah.
Nope, it's not 25, Steve. It's 48. And so people, even if they've graduated from college, really have no idea what it costs. And they also have no idea how to get through the process.
Right.
So the challenge I see with families is, when I'm back in 2004, when I was at University of Phoenix, a freshman student would be eligible for $5,500 in Stafford loans. So 17 years later, so when we filled out FAFSA in October, he's eligible for $5,500. So in 17 years, you think the cost of college has gone up? Of course, it's gone up 6% a year. But the amount of money that the student can get in their name is the same. And parents are like, the sad part is, you can borrow money for your kid to go to college. Can you borrow money for retirement? Nope. So some of these people are going to be working till they're 100
Yeah.
because they wind up with a ridiculous amount of debt. So for me, it's very much an educational thing for parents and students. And like I said, I come across students all the time. Like today is like the last week of the first semester in high school. So, my daughter's going to be in the second half of her freshman year and my son the second half of his senior year. So I come across juniors in high school that don't know the name of their school counselor.
Yeah.
How's that possible? So there's no one there to assist. So I take it upon myself to be that resource for them and go from there.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's great work what you do. And I'm sure, between parents and students and everyone, it's just a valuable resource to have. And you do it that one time and you really need it to get through. So it's really admirable. And during your career, has there been a favorite moment that you've experienced?
I think I'm biased because my favorite college planning student is my son. He's a senior now. He's most likely in August going to be a computer engineer at UMBC.
Congratulations.
And that's great. My
Yeah.
favorite moment, student named Elizabeth. I started working with her when she was a sophomore at Loch Raven High School. She proceeded to graduate high school a year early. She knew when she was a child that she wanted to be a pediatric oncology nurse. So working with kids with cancer. And I'm like, wow, is that as specific as you can be, Elizabeth?
Right.
So long story short, she wound up at Stevenson University. Besides graduating high school a year early, she had 15 credits of college credit from going to the community college and doing AP.
Wow.
And at the time, Stevenson's not Villa Julie anymore. It was $55,000 a year when she was a freshman. And for her, with the work that we did, and I give her all the credit, she was open-minded and she was willing to do all the work. So this is very much more on her and her mom, but she got paid $1,500 to go to Stevenson as a freshman. So it didn't cost her $55,000. It didn't cost her anything. At the end of the year, she had $1,500 in her account, and they wrote her a check. So that to me was like, and I obviously had worked with students prior to that, and I've worked with many since, but that was just so cool knowing that, you know, mom and dad, neither one of them had a job where they made a salary. Mom's a real estate agent, dad is a professional photographer. So they would get paid based on the work they did, but there might be some weeks they don't bring home a penny. So they really needed somebody to walk them through the process. And it was very, very helpful. And I can't tell you how many referrals I've gotten from the mom for other students, because she would just explain Elizabeth's story to them.
Yeah.
It spoke for itself. So that, to me, that was the most reassuring thing, just because, you know, when you're working in a field where people don't even know that that exists, sometimes there's that doubt that, you know, I haven't gotten a new client in the last couple of weeks. You know, am I going to be able to eat? Am I going to be able to pay the mortgage? But that was for me, that was my favorite.
That's amazing. That's a great story too, a great moment in your career. How about any funny or interesting experiences along the way while navigating this world of college planning?
Yeah, there's funny stuff all the time. And I think part of it's because people just they don't quite get it. And colleges get it. They've spent trillions of dollars on marketing. So for example, there's a lot of people up in this area that really are attracted to University of South Carolina. So if you receive their catalog in the mail, ever since I was a kid, I always liked the centerfold, you know what I mean? So I would open it up and it looks like spring break. Yeah. Well, that's their student center, equipped with a lazy river. You can lay on a raft in the lazy river at University of South Carolina. So they know how to market. Yeah. Because they get people. And so I've had students before that's their top school. They don't have your major. Hello. So that's one of the other funny ones too. Young man, mom was amazing. She's an attorney. She's a single mom and 3 kids, a boy and then a girl and then a younger son who was in middle school when I met him. And the older, it was right around holiday time, Thanksgiving, Christmas time of his junior year. And we sat down with him for 2 hours. And the most we could get out of him was he liked dogs and baseball. All right, well, that's a start. So I connected him with the people at Hunt Valley Animal Hospital, and he spent a day there. And a dog got put to sleep, and he cried for 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, scratch it off your list. You can't be a veterinarian if you get upset by a dog getting put to sleep. So the other part of it was, I told him, I said, look, the Aberdeen Ironbirds, they hire like 50 to 100 interns who work at the games during the season. So go on and fill out your application. So he decided to play his junior year of baseball at Delaney and then apply. Well, now it's the 1st of June and everything's full. So his mom decided, you know what, if you're not going to be willing to do any work, you were going to go to CCBC. And by the way, I love the community colleges. Mm-hmm. You know, to take classes at a place for $500 a class to figure out what you want to do with your life, beautiful. So in other words, you know, that Stevenson thing that's, you know, $58,000 a year. Community college, 10 classes at $500 a piece is $5,000. So little bit of cost effectiveness there. Right. So Bennett wound up playing baseball at CCBC in Dundalk, and he's about to finish his associate's degree. But that's exactly where he needed to be because he wasn't willing to do the work and he couldn't figure out what he wanted to do. So that's another thing that's kind of reassuring, is able to guide people through the path. You know, my son, he's loved math since he was a child. In middle school, I don't ever think the math textbook would have needed to leave the school bus. I mean, his math homework was done before he got home. So that moved into the magnet program in math and science at Parkville High School. He did a shadow day when he was in 8th grade there, and he loved it. And so that's his path. Everything he's done has reinforced his decision to work in math or the computer field. You know, I've had clients who, you know, in kindergarten, they knew they wanted to be a school teacher. So when they got to, you know, 9th or 10th grade, guy that I graduated from, Richie Hoffman, owns Celebrate. So what a connection. They can go meet the HR people and they can spend a day with the people from Celebrate. So it's ironic, back in 2012, when I started the college planning, I also started business networking groups. And I've had one that met in Perry Hall every Tuesday since 2012 until COVID. And now we meet on Zoom. And some of your members are part of the group, Dennis Klein, Kathleen Dorsey, and a few others. So I never knew how well the college planning and the networking were going to work together. Because if someone says they want to major in business, well, that's not specific enough. Is that accounting and finance? Because if it is, best friend from high school, he used to work at Ernst & Young. He's a CPA. You're going to spend the day with him. And if that's not your cup of tea, great. Let's look at this mortgage company. That's finance. Does that make sense? No? How about marketing? How about economics? And to me, that's the biggest thing. Figure out what your major is going to be. And then if you can get paid legally to do it, then you never have to work a day in your life. So that's going to be your path. For me, it took me a while. I mean, I loved being a journalist. And if I could have been like a sideline reporter on NFL games, that'd be perfect. But that wasn't my path. And I needed to pay the bills. So I wound up with, sales job just 2 years after working as a journalist. So it's kind of neat to see students that, my son, thankfully, a man named Kevin Spargo, who's the vice president of sales for Computer Services Unlimited in Owings Mills, is a friend of mine, and he's allowed Sammy to do shadow days at his company. So Sammy would sit down with a computer engineer and spend the day with him. He loved it, and they fed him lunch. So he got to see exactly what he would be doing. And like I said, everything he's done has reinforced that decision. In the case of someone like Bennett, dog gets put to sleep, you don't do the proper things with the Ironbirds, then you know what? Your path is going to be different. And maybe that path is going to be a little bit slower. So, I've been blessed along the way too. When I was at Strayer, my mentor worked there. His name is Dr. Barry Thomas. And he was the campus dean of the Owings Mills campus of Strayer when I was the director in White Marsh. And I've become good friends with him. And after he left Strayer, he's taught at Carroll Community College and at Stevenson. So he teaches sociology and human services, both places, 3 classes each semester until last fall when he retired. And so if you take sociology with him at Carroll, you pay $500. If you take it at Stevenson, you pay $5,500. Same guy. Could be the same textbook. So it doesn't make sense to be taking it at Stevenson, especially if you don't know if that's your path.
Yeah.
So he's been very helpful. He's the best professor that I've ever met, and he loves my clients more than I do, I think. So he's been very instrumental in helping me out.
And that's nice for you to have those resources that you can rely on.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Well, that's nice. Okay, well, transitioning into a couple of personal questions about you, Gary. But is there in your wide vocabulary a favorite word or a phrase that you live by or you pass on to your clients or anything like that?
All right, it'll have to be an F word. My favorite 4-letter F word. You ready?
Ready.
Free. Yeah, I love free. It's funny because I listened to the presentation today with the Northwest Chamber that really dealt a lot with financial literacy. And then, of course, my CPA friend, who was my workout partner for 15 years and also my fantasy football partner to this day, he's the millionaire next door. So I think in the 15 years we worked out together, he probably had the same pair of tennis shoes. So not that you need to be that ridiculous, but the financial literacy for me, I don't need to make $1 million a year to be comfortable because I'm driving a 2006 Highlander. I've gone 11 years without a car payment. So when I found out it needed a part and a service that's going to cost me $400, that's cool. I haven't paid a car payment for 11 years.
Yeah.
So not that it's free, but I look at it like that's the way to be successful. And I try to portray that over to the clients. And a lot of times the parents don't have a clue. I know my parents are in their 70s and their financial literacy is terrible. I mean, it was my granny and pop who grew up through the Depression that made all their own clothes and all their own food and lived in the same modest house that my mom grew up in and drove a car till it had 150,000 miles on it and couldn't drive anymore. So yeah, financial literacy, my favorite word, like I said, is free. I like that.
That's a good one, and a good one to keep in mind. How about a favorite noise? Is there anything that you like to work to or relax to or anything like that?
It's funny because a friend of mine's been trying to get me to meditate. So uh, I guess the favorite would be like just the sound of a stream or something in nature that calms me down.
Yeah.
But really, the favorite is the sounds of the voices of my kids. It's nice to be a single dad. Been divorced for 5 years, and it's nice to be able to really care and really be a dad. And sadly, as I go through as a college planner, I've met a couple moms that really didn't get it, but I meet another deadbeat dad every month, and it's sad for me that these people don't take more interest in the lives of their kids. And so for me to hear them, to know that today's the last day of first semester at Parkville High School for both of them. And as I look at the clock and it's 10 after 2, they finished their finals. So it'll be neat to talk to them when we're done here, Emily. But yeah, that's my favorite. And I'm trying to get to the point where something related to nature, whether it's the stream or whether it's birds or something, just to try to calm me down. As you can probably tell, I'm a little bit high strung most of the time. So I made sure today that I stopped drinking coffee and Mountain Dew after 9 a.m. so that I wasn't like all jittery and jacked up while talking to you.
The white noise and like ambient nature sounds will definitely help with that too going forward.
Right.
Okay, and another interesting question. What profession, other than your own, would you have liked to attempt at some point, or would you still like to attempt at some point?
I think for me, it goes all the way back to the journalism thing. When I was at University of Delaware, the very first thing that I ever wrote that had my name on it was a police report. So I went to the University of Delaware school police, and I went to the Newark, Delaware town police, and I compiled their reports and put it together, and it got printed in the newspaper. So I've always been like an investigative journalist type guy. I would love to be Adam Schefter or one of these sports guys that gets to investigate, all right, who are the Ravens signing this offseason? What's going on the sideline? Patrick Mahomes has a concussion. He's not coming back in the game. I'd love to be that guy.
Yeah.
So that's whether it ever happens or not, I don't know. I guess that's in God's hands, right? If that path becomes part of my future, then that would be great. But it's funny. My son is a baseball player and a golfer at Parkville High School, and his pitching coach is a man named Steve Johnson. Steve lives eyesight from my parents' house in Kingsville, that close. And not only Steve, but his dad, Dave, both pitched for the Orioles. So that's the guy that's teaching my son how to pitch. So there's a connection there. So maybe, who knows where it would go. But that's like the ideal job for me. But I think there's so many, especially guys that want to do that job, that there's probably somebody willing to do it for free. And as much as I love the word free, I don't work for free. So I've always thought about that, but when I'm at Delaware, when I was a freshman, a guy named Rich Gannon was a senior, and he played for the Oakland Raiders, and he is an excellent quarterback. So as a reporter, I got to go to the sidelines. I got to watch basketball practice, and I loved that stuff.
Yeah.
I worked for free. I just wrote the articles and compiled them together for my portfolio. I should have gotten paid, but I never did. But it wasn't work. It was fun,
Yeah.
So yeah, something related to sports journalism would be great.
That would be a great job, even if it was like a hobby later in life.
Right.
And probably the most important question of the interview. But what is the one business lesson that you wish you would have known prior to starting your career?
I think it goes back to, the high school and the school counselor thing. I wish I would have had the thought process that, if you find something that you love and that you can get paid to do, you never work a day in your life. So if I would have followed my passion from the beginning of the journalism path, it turns out, and how crazy is this? I graduated from University of Delaware. I've got a bachelor's degree, and my GPA was bad. I won't go into that, but I had literally a pile, 3 or 4 inches high, of all the articles I had written for University of Delaware school newspaper. And graduated the end of May. The 1st of June, I walked into the weekly newspaper in Perry Hall, and I handed the editor these writing samples. He did not even have a high school diploma. Do you think he cared where I went to college? Do you think he cared what my GPA was? Didn't care at all. So if I would have taken those writing samples after my freshman year of college, I could have had a job at that place. Summer after my freshman year, my path would have been quite different. If I'd have traveled to the Philadelphia Daily News and visited Dr. Chuck Stone, who worked for the Philadelphia Daily News for many years, retired from there, and then he went to run the journalism department at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So he would have been a great mentor for me. But I never understood it's really who you know as much as it is what you know. So if I would have taken advantage of Dr. Chuck Stone, if I would have taken advantage of what I could have done with my writing samples earlier, my path would have been quite different. I don't have any regrets. I look at it like, everything that happened to me, that's just the way that God wanted it to be. And it was, nothing ever happens in God's world by mistake. But I think I can use that today to share with students, especially, my 2 kids. Hey, go do that shadow day. And then, hey, you got referred to this cybersecurity company in Baltimore City. Great, I'll drive you there. Spend the day there, And so those are the kind of experiences that, I want my clients and my kids to experience, because it took me a really long time to get to that point. And so I was 43 years old, and all I had done was work for somebody else and make somebody else wealthy. And now it's time for me to do myself. So when you said, hey, let's get together and do an interview, I didn't have to ask anybody. I got the best boss ever now. Hey,
he's looking out for you.
That's right. And so it's also rewarding too that, a lot of these families that I work with are absolutely amazing, but sometimes when you work with somebody, it's just not a good fit. And I can walk away from those people today. And I think that's another lesson that I wish I'd have learned earlier, that if somebody's just really difficult and they're negative and they drag you down, you know what? It's not worth whatever money they're paying you, no matter how much it is. And unfortunately, I had many of those jobs, the jobs where you had a boss that the louder they scream, the harder Gary's going to work, right? No, it doesn't work that way. And I suffered with that for a while, but thankfully it doesn't have to be that way anymore. So
that's a good thing. Good thing. Well, thank you, Gary. It was a pleasure to get to know you a little better today, and I'm sure everyone watching will agree as well. If anyone knows a student gearing up to look for colleges, Gary is a great contact with Spike College Planning. We will share his contact information. So if anyone does know anyone in that boat, he is a great person to get in touch with.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Emily. My son and I started working together the summer after 7th grade, because the beginning of 8th grade is when you pick your magnet school in Baltimore County Public Schools. And I've also worked with students who were already in college. But if you're majoring in undeclared, fun declared, that's probably not a good use of yours and your parents' money. So anywhere in between, right now I'm really focusing on high school freshmen and sophomores, because especially with COVID and not having that network of people that you see every day in person, it makes it really challenging to develop the type of network and the relationships you need to figure out college and your major. So thanks for your time, Emily. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Well, we will see you guys next week. Another big thanks to Gary for joining us, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.